Welcome everyone to a brand new series of motorsport podcasts. Many of you will have listened to our Engineering Formula One Drivers series with the likes of Patrick Head, Adrian Newey and Gordon Murray earlier this year. I'm delighted to bring you the next set of recordings. This time we turn our attention to the Scuderia, the Formula One team that's so famous it's simply referred to as the team. Founded in 1939 and a constant on the F1 grid since that first World Championship in 1950, Ferrari is the team that every driver wants to race for. 221 pole positions, 253 fastest laps, 238 Grand Prix victories, and let's not forget the 16 Formula One World Championships. For all its success and wonderful history though, Ferrari has always been a tricky place to work. Many drivers have left or been unceremoniously kicked out after little more than a season. What is Ferrari like to drive for? And what of Enzo himself? In this series of podcasts, we speak to the men who know best, those lucky few who have driven for Ferrari during their Formula One careers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Motorsport Podcast with 10-time Grand Prix winner, Gerhard Berger. Now, this is part of the Driving for Ferrari series, and while I want to talk about the likes of Senna, Benetton, the DTM, the current state of Formula One, we'll be looking specifically at Gerhard's time at Ferrari. Now, you'll also notice that we're doing this via Zoom. Now, this truly is motorsport in its 96th year, jumping into the 21st century. So we've got Alan Hyde in the background, making sure that you can hear us. So thank you, Alan. And I hope you all enjoy your first sort of motorsport Zoom experience. Gerhard, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
So much to talk about, it's even just concentrating on your time at Ferrari. So we might as well just jump straight in. You were quite a sort of a young Formula One, well, you were quite a new Formula One driver by the time you went to Ferrari. You know, you'd done 3 years and then bang, you were off to Maranello. Can you remember when you first got that call?
Of course I can remember, and I have to say it was really, I was just entering from motorsport because I had just 3 years before I entered Formula One, I had about 40 races done, and I had the possibility to go and race Formula One. What was for me a great surprise, it was not in me to make calculation, but suddenly as I found myself after doing 1 year Alpha Suit, 2 years Formula 3, and a half year Formula 3, I find myself in Formula One. And then I was in Formula One, and I had the luck to go into Aeros with Jackie Oliver in the first full year, who was a great teacher together with Alan Rees. And I had the chance to move from there to Benetton and win my first race and getting at the same time already a first call of Ferrari. So everything felt like just arriving in motorsport and sitting in Ferrari. And I remember when Marco Piccinini called me after the Imola race and said, well, you know, Mr. Ferrari would like to talk with you. Would you mind to come and visit us in Maranello? And I said, of course, that's what I would love to do. But I was kind of surprised. But at the same time, the telephone was ringing, I remember. And Jackie Stewart was calling me and said, well, can we talk with you about Tyrrell? And so I was already in contact with Ron Dennis, with McLaren. So everything happened very fast. But when I got the call of Ferrari, emotionally, this immediately catch me.
You obviously met Enzo, but you know, obviously we'll talk about his death the year after. Actually, probably, you know, maybe perhaps first met him in '86. He was still a very kind of influential figure at Ferrari right up until the end, wasn't he? He was, you know, he really was pulling all the strings. He
was still until the end. Maybe the last year not so much anymore, but because he was already ill and it was maybe a bit more difficult for him. But when I arrived in Ferrari, yes, he was fully onto it and he was the decision maker. He was the guy what thought about it. He had his clear ideas and yeah, it was up to him. Even if Marco Piccinini was his team manager at the time and Piero Lardi as his son was kind of the side of Marco Piccinini. But in the end of the day, when I came to Ferrari and I visited Ferrari, everything was done directly with Enzo.
Mm. And because the 87 season, that first season, you did have quite a lot of mechanical problems, but you won the last 2 rounds, winning. I mean, you won a Grand Prix before that, but winning for Ferrari, it's different, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, it was already arriving in Ferrari was already so special. But you know, I was young and I was very happy about it. But the day after I've signed, I took it as normal. And but then when I arrived in Ferrari, yes, we've been a bit struggling in the beginning of the season just to get certain things right. But then from mid-season on, I think we've been the most competitive combination, myself with Ferrari, to win races. We didn't win the races because about some small mistakes, about technical things. But I remember in Estoril, I was leading until the last lap. I was fighting with Alain Prost for the win, and then in the last lap I spun, so I finished just second. In Jerez was a race. I was stuck in traffic, but actually we've been already quickest car around there. And then we won Adelaide and Suzuka. So, I mean, it was a clear year. I think for it was Nelson what won the championship in 87. It was a clear Williams-Honda year, if I remember well, but help me if I mix it up. But anyway, I think we've been, from mid-season on, we've been clearly a championship fighter. We've been just a bit too far back on the points. And so for us, it was clear the year after is the year.
And because I thought you didn't start racing until you were 21, and I seem to remember you saying somewhere that, you know, a lot of the people from where you live, you know, were sort of, you know, what on earth is this guy doing, starting racing age 21? You know, once you got into that Ferrari Formula One car and then won races with them, that must have been quite a satisfying thing to do with, you know, anyone who doubted you.
Should I be honest? I still cannot believe it today. but that things like happens on that. So I have to laugh sometimes when fathers are already starting to draw down the way how the son has to go to Ferrari from being kindergarten, you know, exiting kindergarten to the school and knowing already karting at this year, karting then at this year, then with this team, then Formula 2, Formula 3, whatever.
Yeah.
I think you can do it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and also all the many millions of pounds that would go towards trying to get to Ferrari now. It's funny because...
Not now. It was at the time also, you know, it was a very difficult thing to be one of Ferrari drivers, being always something very special, you know.
Yeah. It's obviously Ferrari has been in the sport, you know, since the dawn of the World Championship in 1950, you know, and before then. It's won 16 World Championships. You know, it's had some of the most famous drivers racing for it. But, you know, there are other teams. There's Williams, there's McLaren that have been around for a very long time, won championships. What is it about Ferrari that gives it this, it has an aura, doesn't it?
Well, I think Ferrari came from, the road car side of Ferrari was always connected with racing. And it's one, I feel it as one unit. And it was the first company, Enzo Ferrari was the first man that says, well, my race car has to be a road car. It has to be a racing car, racing road car on the street. And the other way around, gave the name to the famous name to the race cars. So these two sides bumped each up all the time. And it came the most famous and the company with the most image in the car industry over all these years. But this was very much supported by racing. So I think the original idea of him was just perfect. Today, more companies try to do it. But at the time, I think it was a very wise thing to say, well, I have to be successful in the race, then I can pump up my brand on the road.
Yeah. It's funny because motorsport has this enormous online shop with thousands and thousands of products, from kind of books to memorabilia and everything like that. But it's always the Ferrari stuff that sells the fastest. And I think I was looking this morning, there's a 1998 Schumacher signed helmet. And I guarantee you that will be gone in a matter of days. It's just incredible that one manufacturer can have such an amazing pull from around the world. You know, even people who've never been to Maranello or a Formula One race, they're just absolutely besotted by it.
Yeah, it's everywhere. But even when you bring a T-shirt to a child or something, or a cap, you know, you're very famous if you bring the Ferrari cap or Ferrari
Yeah.
T-shirt. But
Yeah.
the same, you know, when you try to be clever in historic cars, of course there are some McLarens, there's some Bugattis, but in general, with a Ferrari, you never get wrong. The price increasing year by year, it's nearly clear.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the '88 season, obviously, which was a huge season for many reasons, not least of Enzo's death in August that year. It was also a season completely dominated by McLaren, winning 15 of the 16 races. However, one G. Berger did win in his Ferrari at Monza. I think it was 4 weeks after Enzo died.
Yeah.
In terms of pivotal wins or important wins, that must be, just talk me through kind of how that, you know, after Enzo's death and then, you know, winning that race at Monza.
I mean, it was quite funny anyway, because as you say, if McLaren won every race, it was very dominating. Well, let's step even, go even back one other step. Why they been so dominating? When obviously Ayrton and Allen, two top guys, maybe the best guys in the car. They did a fantastic chassis and they had an extremely strong engine. But why did they have such a strong engine as we've been in the end of '87, as competitive as they were, or maybe even more competitive? But then the winter was coming and there was a regulation change. The bobber valve was introduced. So the engine was cut off a bit on power for cost reason, for reliability, for safety reason, whatever. And they introduced this bobber valve. That was to blow off boost. So the turbo pressure wasn't going up anymore to 5.5 bar boost, and so on. So we basically reduced through this bobber valve the power of engines cut. And in the winter, we all went testing, and we never had this bobber valve on our engine. And I always said to our engineers, well, everything is fine, this is working well, but why do we don't have this bobber valve on the engine? So, yeah, don't worry. We have it on the desk bench. We understand it completely. Everything is fine. You're gonna be fine with it. So we didn't really test over the winter under the proper terms. We took this bobber valve not in our center of trying to understand it. Honda did the opposite. They've been just working on this bobber valve, and I think they found a way to overpressure the valve in the bobber valve. So being able to keep still being a bit higher on boost. And it took us half season until we start to understand this. But so we came in '88 and we've been completely surprised the performance of these engines. And obviously with this combination, I said before, it was winning every race. And it looked like they win all the races all the season and we all have no chance. I finished regularly as third behind the two McLarens. But still, it was very, very frustrating. And before we went to Monza, Enzo Ferrari died, and I visited Ferrari and went through the workshop. And I was with Marco Piccinini and Pierre Rolati, and we spoke. And they said to me, Gerhard, what are we going to do in Monza? And one of them said, we'll finish third like usual because the two McLaren. I said, no, Monza, we're going to win. And they say, oh, if you win, you can have the car. I said, okay, let's make shake hands. So I went to Monza, win the race, got the car onto the trailer, brought it with me home. So it was actually quite funny. It was very surprising that we won the race, but we've been not far off. It was, in Monza, it was getting tough for Ayrton. I was on his back, I think 3 seconds behind him, and I started to make pressure, and I was with fuel okay, and I understood that Ayrton was a bit tight on fuel. And I started to put pressure on, and Ayrton knows with the fuel he had still left, he was safe, but he could not lose anywhere, anytime. So then he comes to backmarkers, and Julius Lesser was one of them. And I think it was just on the stage where I said, well, it's better I get by as quick as possible, otherwise I have Gerhard in my neck. And this didn't work out, and then I was able to win the race.
It's funny, there is nowhere better to be than Italy if you are a Ferrari driver winning races. But I think it's also fair to say there's nowhere worse to be than Italy if you're a Ferrari driver and not winning races. The Italians and also the press as well. Did you ignore all the press? Because the Italian press is extremely vocal.
Everybody talks always about the press. I went through difficult times in Ferrari. I mean, when I arrived, Ferrari was for a long period not winning any race. So I was lucky I could then stop this period and win it. But still, I had also time what was very, very difficult from a performance side with Ferrari. But I never had a problem with the Italian press. I dealt with them in a very natural way. I always had the feeling they like me, I like them, because, and I wasn't going in too deep into the press stuff. First, I didn't speak Italian anyway. I didn't understand, so maybe they read a lot of bullshit, but I couldn't read it. But so it didn't make me angry, and I was always friendly with them. But I think overall, they treated me always extremely well.
Yeah. Because then moving into the sort of the 89 season, you were joined by Nigel Mansell. You'd had a couple of seasons with Michele. What was it like having Mansell come in? Because he's quite a forceful character, I think is probably the right phrase.
Yeah, you're so polite.
A delicate touch with words, yeah.
I know. You're too close to this area. You need to be very political correct. No, that was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Michele was a real gentleman, very smooth, very, very fine guy. Obviously, Nigel had much more killing instinct. So it was, for me, it was more difficult with Nigel than with Michele. And, but not in a personal way. Personally, I always had a good relationship with him, and I still have it. But on the racetrack, so qualifying was okay, but in race trim, he had extremely good racecraft. And unfortunately, in 89, we had a car where the geometry of the front suspension in a certain way gave an extremely tough steering, hard steering. And I was struggling with my power in my hands. And Nigel had hands like an elephant, so or like very, very strong hands. And he'd been physically always extremely tough, very strong. And so in the race, it was quite difficult with him to beat him, or to be ahead of him, or to be with him. But I think we managed the season where one time he was in front, one time I was in front, and we had a reasonable good relationship, and we kept the relationship until today. I see him very seldom, but I'm happy if I see him.
Yeah, it's because Mansell was famous for sort of winding Patrese up at Williams, in the early 90s, and I think every time he came into the pits, he changed all his active ride settings so that when Patrese looked over the cockpit to try and copy his active ride, so there was a lot of games. Were the games between you and him, or was it fairly straightforward?
Straightforward. I didn't look what he was doing.
Yeah, well, that makes it easier. Because after when
that's right. It's a bit like with the Italian press. I didn't read what he was writing, so I had no problem.
Yeah, so it wasn't bad.
Right.
Yeah. Because when did you hear that your contract wasn't being renewed at Ferrari? Because at end of 89, you obviously then went and you basically did a swap and went to McLaren with Prost coming to Ferrari. It was
the other way around. They won't keep me. They won't keep. He was fighting for me, but I was ready to go. So I think together with Nicky, me and Nicky was the only two drivers what left Ferrari. What was always a kind of thing what is not allowed to do, but that's what I did, and I did it twice.
Yeah,
twice. But it was nothing bad. I was just 3 years with Ferrari, and I felt a bit tired of just seeing Ferrari. As much I liked them, been with my family, but on the other side, I said, I want to see something others. And I had a nice offer from Ron. And McLaren was at the time also on the top and the most successful team at the time. So I changed to McLaren simply because I was wanted some new experience. And I remember at the time when I told to Ferrari that I leave, Gianni Agnelli sent Luca Montezemolo from Torino to come with me and to try to convince me to stay. But I felt just to do something different. And then I went to McLaren. And after 3 years, I felt I'm missing Ferrari. So that's why I went back. And after 3 years again, I said, well, enough is enough again.
It's a very, as you mentioned there, it's very, very rare for a driver to not only leave Ferrari once, but be able to come back and then leave again. Now, if you're looking for more Ferrari content, then you may well be interested in Motorsport's latest publication. Ferrari, From Race to Road, celebrates the journey of the world's most famous car brand and its unique place in motor racing history. Using Motorsport's unmatched archive of stories and photographs, we trace the Ferrari story, from its early days under Enzo right up to date, with interviews with current F1 star Charles Leclerc and F1 team boss Mattia Binotto. Along the way, we celebrate some of the all-time classic race cars, including the wonderful 1975 312T and races such as the Targa Florio. Plus, we test some of the greatest Ferrari road cars. Illustrated with world-class photographs and wonderful writing, Ferrari, From Race to Road, is a must-have for all fans of the marque. It's on sale now in all good newsagents, or you can buy it via the Motorsport website, which is motorsportmagazine.com. We've got lots of readers' questions in, which I'll come to in a bit, but a lot of them are basically screaming, "Tell us the Ayrton Senna stories." Now, some of these are very well known, but
I'm tired of it.
You had a very interesting relationship with him, though, because I think, did you say that you taught him how to laugh and he showed you how to drive? Is that fair?
No, that's no. But no, I mean, first, I didn't have a special relationship. I had just a normal relationship with him. What came a special friendship through a normal relation. And it was simply, it's maybe a bit my nature too, you know. In all my career, I never had a problem with a teammate. And why I didn't have, most probably because naturally, I always had a very good speed. And I could handle my teammates through my natural speed. And obviously when I decide to leave Ferrari and go into McLaren, I know Ayrton is there, but I say to myself, oh, well, Ayrton, no Ayrton, it's just another driver. As I experienced already many, and I saw them usually having a problem with me, not I'm having a problem with them. And most probably gonna be the same here. But then when I started racing with him, I saw that he has also the natural speed, but he has also done already not 40 races as I did until I get to Formula One. He did maybe through karting 400 races. So he saw the starting grid already 400 times instead of my 40 times. He'd been more disciplined than me. He'd been more hardworking than me. And for him, life was just racing. And for me, life was racing, and life was also having a nice party. And so obviously he looked to me because he could see that my day was split in two, one in the day racing and one in the night having the party. And he joined it sometimes. And I always been nice, friendly with him. And obviously I tried very, very hard. And that's why I don't like to go so much into the joke side and to this discussion, because in the end of the day, I realized first time there's a driver who I cannot beat in a way as I did beat other drivers. Just, okay, brake a bit later or be a bit early on the throttle. So I studied him very, very careful, everything. What is he doing? Where is he better? And I just realized that he is more experienced, he has more perfection, he's more disciplined, and so on. And I didn't try to find the problem in him. I say, Gerhard, it's your problem, it's not his problem. Move your arms. But I could see that it was just not possible to beat him. But I did not try to politically to disturb his success, because I thought, well, it's the only way is get quicker yourself or get better yourself, and then you do the job, or otherwise you're not better than him.
Yeah.
And I think he realized this, and I think he appreciated it a lot, because I think before he had a couple of teammates with Alan, and we know all the stories, where he got a very tough time, and he'd been very sensitive on it. And I think for him was a big release to have a driver respecting his performance to the maximum.
Do you think, because you mentioned it there, that you love the racing part of it, but you also love going to the parties in the evening. Do you think you were also talking about the fact that you studied every kind of element of the way Senna drove and how he did things? Do you think you have a sort of misrepresented, in terms, do people look back at you in the wrong way and don't take you seriously enough? Because you obviously have enormous talent. You go out and you beat Senna, you out-qualify him and things like that. Do you think people focus too much on the partying, and do you think that sort of slightly takes away from what you did on track?
Yeah, everybody in Formula One gets a little bit of image, Mansell was always crying. Damien was the gentleman. Alan was the professor. Erdon was the perfection, and me was the playboy. Yeah. So right or wrong, everybody got somehow an image, and I played my image because it fitted to me. And when I studied Erdon and when I studied what he did, most probably I did it in the bar in the evening, and that maybe was wrong. I should have done it maybe in the track with the daters.
Am I right in thinking that Ayrton used to talk to you about the fact that he did one day want to go to Ferrari, but it's obviously when he was alive and there were opportunities, the car just wasn't, where it needed to be. Was that true?
Kind of, yeah. Ayrton says, or let's say, Ayrton knows first when Honda is leaving McLaren. He knows it before Ron Dennis, before anybody, because he was very well connected with Honda in Japan. He came to me and said, "Gerhard, we're in the shit because Honda is leaving McLaren." And I said, "What are we going to do then?" He said, "Well, I don't know." But so I did my dealing with Ferrari, and I went Ferrari. And one day when I said to Ayrton, "Listen, I have my solution. I'm going to Ferrari." And he said, "Well, that's a good idea. You go to Ferrari. There's a lot to sort out for the moment, and I come after." I say, "You can be one thing sure, I'm never going to be in a team with you anymore." That's the only thing I have in my contract, no Senna anymore. So joking a little bit, but it was this kind of conversation. Say, no, you stay where you are. So, but I know he was always waiting for a situation, for a moment where he could see that Ferrari was good enough or that he will be able to win the championship. But it was his dream to end up with Ferrari to win a championship.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned there, obviously, you then returned to Ferrari for the 1993 Formula One season. And obviously, I'm not going to press you on the Ayrton stories, but can you tell those listeners who haven't heard about a small incident with a Lancia road car and Jean Alesi? Because I seem to remember you had a little moment arriving at the Ferrari factory to see the new car for the first time. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. There was the new car produced for, I don't know anymore which season it was, and we had the first race 2 weeks later, I think in Brazil. And the car was just put together on the pit in Maranello. There's the racetrack, and the pit, they just put the last screws together. And it was the first time this car had to run. Jean Alesi was there, myself was there, should run the car first time. And so we went lunch, and we've been both in the overalls, and we went lunch. And if you know Maranello has the racetrack on one area where you have to go by car from the main office. And after lunch, I wasn't with Jean. Jean was his lunch meeting. We met each other in the office, main office building, and he says, "Gerhard, I come with you." And I said, "No, I come with you. I don't have a car." And he said, "I don't have a car." And we just been in front of the offices, just looking, and I say, "Well, we have a car here. Look, there's a car staying with a key on." She said, "Oh, great." So he went into driving the car. I was sitting next. I put my seatbelt around because he was driving like flat out. And yeah, you have to go a bit through a normal road, and then you enter where the main racetrack is. And there is the office of Mr. Ferrari. And then the next is like a normal pits where the cars are, where the mechanics works on the cars, and where the pit exit gets to the Maranello racetrack. And I start to play with the handbrake on the normal road, and we go sideways and things, and he got worse and he got flat out. I put my seat, I remember, completely back with the seat belt because I saw it coming that this is not going to work out well. And then we passed this office of where Enzo Ferrari used to have his office, and I put the handbrake on, and the car, for some reason, just took off, just started to fly, and turn in the air and land on the roof. And it was a Lancia. It was like paper, you know. So the roof immediately went to the seats, and we were sliding on the floor in the direction just where the mechanics were staying with the race car putting the race car. So we crashed into the pit wall about 1 meter of the brand new race car. The mechanic all jumped on the side. And me, the seatbelt, I was fine. I was still sitting in the seat like this, but Sean had no seatbelt on. So he turned him around. He was nose on nose with me. And then we was in the car. They couldn't get us out anymore from the cars because it was so deformed. So the mechanics put us out in a back window, and Sean was blooding and the face, and that for some things in glass in and whatever. And the most funny thing for me was, in Maranello, there's an ambulance car. And the ambulance car, it's based every test when a Formula One car goes, since 25 years at the time, 25 years, every time 2 doctors with ambulance cars with an engine on has to stay next to the truck if something happened with the Formula One car, if an accident happened, to have a first service. For 25 years, they had no work. This was the first work they had. so they jumped on it, put Sean into the car, put the blue light on, and went to the hospital. So Sean was gone, and I was by myself. So we took the car, we covered it, we put it a bit on the side, we cleaned the truck because all was full of oil and fuel. And the mechanics just checked the head all day long. And so anyway, I put the helmet on and said, oh, if Montezemolo and Jean Todt is coming, we're going to be in troubles. So I thought it's best is I do a race distance. I don't want to see anybody. I just got to stay out. So anyway, when I come in with the helmet on, obviously there I see already Jean Todt and Montezemolo was looking, of course, to the new car. And then I put the helmet down and we spoke, and they didn't know about anything. Nobody told them. So at one stage I had to tell them that, and they got nervous. Where's Sean? And they got very upset that we've been able to do something like this 2-3 weeks before the first race. But then Sean says to me, and where is the car? I said, the car is there. So you could see on a green field the car just half meter high, covered by a big Ferrari towel. And so he went over and he put it away, and he saw, and it was his car. He parked his car in front of his office with the key on. We took his car.
Oh, like, does Jean Todt still mention that?
He was very upset because he didn't find it very respectful.
Does he still mention it now?
No, we haven't spoken since long time. It's so long time ago. But,
right.
But the interesting thing was, we could keep it quite quiet for the press because we've been all nervous for a moment that the press gonna kill us to see us joking around. But anyway,
brilliant. The following year, there was Ayrton's death, but you also won Ferrari's first race since 1990. It's another kind of pivotal race for Ferrari. We've got a question here from Adrian King, which is just slightly related, I guess, to your race wins. He's asking, please, can you ask Gerhard in which year or years he felt he maximized his talent and what factors contributed to this outcome?
For me, my peak was 1987. I felt very good on this turbo car. I liked turbo cars. Maybe something, I don't know what it has to do, but turbo cars for me was great. Turbo cars need a little bit of different line to drive. You brake a bit in a different way into corners and has to get a bit early on the throttle and it's a different line. And I always liked it. And the car, after we modified it a bit with some sidepods modification, it came very much to my driving style. And at the time, I was 27, 28, just perfect. And I think I had a little bit of experience already. The car fitted to my style. And I think that year I was on maximum performance, especially in Suzuka, Adelaide. Adelaide, I had a very tough race against Ayrton in very hot conditions. So this was my peak from 27. Then 28, I would be the same. Unfortunately, we did what we did in the Boba Valve, as I said before. And then in 89, I had my big crash. And after my big crash, I think I was there. I still delivered. But the fun for taking risk was not in the same way than before.
Well, it's funny, we got another question here from someone called Dan R, who just wanted a bit of insight into what it took to get back into the cockpit after that accident at Imola in 1989. Because, you know, I've watched it on YouTube. It is an enormous accident. You escaped kind of major injury, but it still must have been, as Dan says, physically and psychologically very tough to get back into the cockpit after that.
Yes and no. What motivated me the most was that typical Ferrari, they didn't think I'm coming back too quick. And I remember Fiorio at the time was team manager, and he was a bit in love with Larini. And it was just great to put Larini in and give him the chance. And so nothing wrong on this. I have no problem with it, but you know, we know it from Nicky and so on. I was in the hospital, and I said, well, you're going to be surprised how quick I'm back in my car. And that's what I did. And that was my big motivation. But obviously, I couldn't go too fast because I had holes in my hands from the fire. And I couldn't do it in Monaco, but in Mexico, I was already there. And yeah, it was, when I went in first time in the car, I felt a bit strange because the body realized again the materials of the overall and of the fire underwear. They realize a little bit like we are back to where we've been when we've been in the fire. But it was not a big thing.
Now, do we know, we're sort of nearing the sort of latter stages of this podcast, and I did want to talk about, because the second time you left Ferrari after it was the 95 season. What were your motivations then? Because you went back to Benetton. Why the move to Benetton? And then also, when you retired, I think you had offers for 1998, but I don't think you weren't keen on the groove tyres. Is that right? And the V10s?
No, you know, first I liked the turbo cars. The normal aspect cars I didn't like so much in the turbo cars, but not a big thing, you know. I never liked the cars with the narrow rear tires, because suddenly the cars in the rear was under-tired a bit, and I was always a guy. I liked the solid rear end and cope a little bit with understeer. So, but this kind of cars always was been in the back a bit tricky. But so the guys from karting, they had for them felt a bit more normal than for us coming from the wide wheel end from Formula One. But that was all not the point. The point was first. Why did I go from Ferrari to Benetton? It was actually going back to leaving first time Ferrari to McLaren. When I've been with Ferrari first time, I got a young engineer. Name was Giorgio Ascanelli. Everybody knows him now. He had a long time career then in Formula One. He came out from the school. I didn't in the beginning. I wasn't so impressed to get somebody out from the school. But then it came an engineer who worked fantastic for me. He just felt exactly what I need from the car. He was actually one of maybe the first guy starting to put wind tunnel numbers, roll bar numbers, tire numbers into his computer and calculating setups and so on. And it worked. A big part of it worked, and it fit to my driving style. But I thought that's normal. And when I went to Ferrari, I was missing him. So I went to Ron Dennis and I said, Ron, there's one very good engineer in McLaren, in Ferrari. I think we should get him. He would be a big add for the company, and I really worked fantastic with him. I would like to work again with him there. So he listened to it and said, okay. One day Ron called me and said, Gerhard, I have bad news for you and I have good news for you. What would you like here first? I say, of course, the good news. He says, Ascanelli is coming. I say, okay, but what is the bad news? He says, he's on Senna's car. So thank you very much. So that was something where killed me a little bit. That's where Ayrton killed me a little bit in the back. But okay. And then when I was again with Ferrari, Ascanelli was still there, but he worked as a kind of supervisor, engineer supervisor. And I was hoping to get him onto my car again. Then I realized Schumacher is coming. And I know Schumacher was extremely strong and was a guy not to underestimate. And I said, I don't want to do the same mistake again than I did with Ayrton. With Schumacher, I need to prepare myself in the best way. And for this, I need Ascanelli on my car. And I said to Ferrari, I say, listen, I would like to get Ascanelli back onto my car now, just onto my car. And I couldn't agree with Sean on this matter. I said, no, we need him over. And I could smell that if I'm not careful, it happened the same then it happened in McLaren with Senna. So then at one stage, I said to myself, well, that's what, if this is not happening, I will go, I will leave. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And I mean,
and that was the reason, that's actually was really the reason why I left Ferrari to Benetton.
Yeah. And then in end of 97, when you retired, I think you had offers for 98, but you didn't take them up, and you were gone.
No, you know, for me it was clear to stop. The only thing I said to myself, if there would be a Mercedes possibility, McLaren Mercedes possibility, then I should really consider it again. But this didn't get together, so for me it was clear.
Yeah. Fast forwarding to present day, what in your opinion, you know, you are still, you know, you've got your fingers on the pulse in terms of Formula One. You had a 50% stake in Toro Rosso sort of a decade or so ago. What is happening at Ferrari, and why is it, you know, all teams kind of ebb and flow with their performances, but I always feel that Ferrari ebbs and flows kind of even more strongly. You know, they have a period of utter domination, like the Schumacher years, and then they'll have something like they have now, where they, you know, struggling to get out of Q1.
Well, you know, you need to be an insider, or you need to be in the team to be really correct on what you're saying. I would say, first, in the end of the day, as long in the time I've been in the business, just two guys really made Ferrari successful, winning championships. Of course, you had a one-off in one or two times, but it was Nicky and it was Michael Schumacher. And I think also, and when I've been there, the big wish of Ferrari as an Italian team, it's always to try to perform to win championship with an Italian team, all Italians, and on performing as fully Italian. I say today is not possible. You need to guess. Formula One is so complicated, so high level. You need the best guy in the world. Wherever you find him, get him and put him in. It doesn't matter which nationality yet. In the end of the day, the win or the championship goes back to Italy anyway, because Ferrari is Italian. Mm. And I understood a couple of years ago that it was again the new, for Macchione, that was the big wish, just doing it with Italians. So nothing, they are good, but as I say, in every spectre you need, in segment, you need the best. And when we, and I think this is a big mistake, and when we look back to Schumacher, you had the best was Ross Brown in his segment. He was English. Yeah. The best was Jean Dott in politique and in as a team manager. He was French. The best in the aerodynamic was Newey and Rory Byrne. He was South African. Yeah. The best driver at the time was Michael Schumacher, was German.
Yeah.
So Sean put this all together, and Michael was stealing the people left, right, wherever he got it. You know, and they formed a fantastic international team, and they got the success as they got it. Yeah. And that's the way how it works.
Yeah.
Second part of it, I have to say, is last winter FIA published that Ferrari was not in the regulation, and we never got any fully transparency on the matter, but legally they've been not right. So, and you could see when it was corrected, when FIA looked into it, all Ferrari cars, all Ferrari powered cars went 1 second slower. Yeah. And if you have this issue for a while, it's the time when you stop development because you maybe fix it in a different way. And now they fall back maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, whenever they started to use different things. And that's tough because now you need to catch up. You need to find the right people. It's a difficult process. And I say Ferrari will be much better next year. But will they be already on the top? I think it will, in the best case, it will be next in 3 years.
Yeah. Now, just before we wrapped up, I wanted to talk about the DTM briefly.
I want just to tell you one thing more about it, because that's my analyzing. But I love Ferrari. My heart is Ferrari. And even if at the moment things are not working out well, I'm a supporter of them. I don't want to put any all into anywhere. I think we all, what Ferraristas should stick together and should say, well, that's what it is. Let's hope they make the right decisions for the right people. And let's hope Ferrari soon gonna be again a contender for the championship.
I think every motorsport fan in the world, whether secretly or not, is a Ferrari supporter, because it's impossible to love the sport and not love the team.
Yeah, inside the business is different because you have the competition.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. So let's say it this way: maybe it's not the Ferrari fan, but you have very few people there really against Ferrari. Some are neutral, and a lot of them are like positive and love it. And I always say, well, it's the core of our business.
Yeah. So the DTM, we've got a couple of questions here. We've got a very positive one and a very negative one. I feel like Ron Dennis. Let's start this time with the negative one, because last time was the positive one. So this is a comment from Old Autosports. I haven't used their real name, but he's asking whether you are accepting responsibility for leading DTM down a dead end, and therefore, just kind of making the championship sort of quite difficult, or does the blame lie elsewhere? And then the second one, which is the positive one.
Let's stick first to the first one. I don't know that, and we have a great program for next year. I don't know what he's talking. I mean, we are changing technical regulation, because our regulation, as much I liked it and I supported it, I took it over. But I as much I liked it and supported it, it was just not possible to find manufacturers in this stage to invest development into the development of this kind of regulation. So in some ways, yes, we run out of time, and so we had to change the technical regulation. What was done already many times in the time of DTM in 30 years. So you had already Group 5 cars, you had cars very close to road cars, you had Class 1 regulation. So different, and we're gonna have again another regulation. But all the rest stays as it is. So I don't know what he means.
Yeah. So, well, this other one is someone else who hasn't used their real names. They're just called LMP1, who's an Australian motorsport fan, and he long had an ambition to attend a round of the DTM. He did that at Zolder last year and was very impressed with the category. Great cars and unique. With the change to GT3 base cars for 2021, what have you got in mind to make DTM GT3 different from the other GT3 series?
Yeah, it's very difficult. Good question, because I love this Class 1, because Class 1, the cars, the race cars as they are at the moment, they are really proper. I would say after Formula 1, very impressive car, let's say this way. We did Spa a couple of weeks ago, and the cars was just, I think, 4 seconds slower than an LMP1 car. And so really fast cars.
Amazing.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we couldn't go on, as I explained before. And now the only reasonable good way was to take as a base the GT3 regulation. What is a great regulation? I'm fine with it. The only downside of it, you have to work on BOP. And for a sportsman, BOP, it's always a little bit of pain. But this is what we got, what we have. Then I would like to study it very careful and just see which modifications on this regulation can be done, maybe just to increase a little bit the performance of the cars without, and that's very important, without spending extra budgets again, because we have Corona, we have car industry what is struggling. At the moment, there's no room for for big budget increase. So we're going to end up in a couple of modifications, but nothing significant. So in the end of the day, you're going to see GT3 cars fighting in an TTM environment with TTM TNA.
Yeah. So, you know, despite the coronavirus, the sort of economics of everything at the moment, you kind of very positive and excited about the season to come next year in the GT3 move?
Yes and no. Exactly as you said. In general, yes, because we have a lot of interest at the moment with different brands. So I think we're going to have something strong. POP we have to handle, as I said before, going to be a bit of pain. But the main issue at the moment is to see what Corona going to do next year. Do we still have to fight Corona in some ways to race without spectator? Because for us, the income stream on the spectators is very important. And also, the no fans. When I went to the first race, I was okay because I said, well, that's what it is, and to work, it's okay. But after the third race, I got nearly a bit into depression, staying on the starting grid. You know, nobody is here, so we need the fans back. The fans is one of the most important things in the sport in general.
Yeah. Well, Gerhard, I mustn't keep you because I know you have many things to get on and do this afternoon. But thank you so much for sharing all those Ferrari stories with us over the last sort of 45 minutes, an hour. Thank you. And no doubt see you at a DTM round soon or perhaps in the Formula One paddock. Thank you all for listening and for watching. I hope you enjoyed our first Zoom experience. It's certainly been a voyage of discovery for us at Motorsport. So thank you to Alan, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye for now.